Most people believe betrayal begins the moment you catch someone. In reality, it usually begins much earlier, in small behavioral shifts, in subtle changes you dismiss because you trust the person standing beside you, in moments where intuition speaks quietly and loyalty tells you to ignore it. Victor Lang was 44 years old and had always believed he understood how life worked. Work hard, stay loyal, build slowly, protect what you have. He was not a man who chased chaos. He built stability instead. Until one ordinary evening proved how quickly stability can disappear. 3 months earlier, he would have described his life as predictable in the best possible way. His mid-sized logistics company outside Charlotte was stable, profitable, and expanding at a steady pace. Not the kind of company that made headlines, but the kind banks trusted. The kind that paid mortgages and created long futures. He owned a large brick house at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac where neighbors competed over landscaping and holiday decorations. The type of neighborhood where nothing dramatic was supposed to happen. Victor had been married to Catherine for 16 years. No children. Not because they never wanted them, but because life kept postponing the conversation, until eventually it stopped coming up at all. Their marriage had settled into something that looked solid from the outside. Shared routines, shared finances, shared plans that always seemed scheduled for next year. Catherine had left her corporate HR position about 5 years earlier. She said she wanted freedom, creativity, control over her own time. She began building a social media presence around lifestyle content, fitness routines, and relationship advice. Victor supported it without hesitation. New camera equipment, professional lighting, a home office renovation. He even paid for a web designer she liked because she said presentation mattered. Victor believed in investing in people he loved. That belief would later feel like the most expensive investment he had ever made. Christian Blake entered their lives through a charity networking event about 7 years earlier. He was the type of man who introduced himself like he already knew you. Confident handshake, direct eye contact, perfectly measured charisma. The kind that worked especially well on people who respected confidence. Victor never openly disliked him. But something about Christian always felt slightly engineered, like every conversation had a hidden objective. Catherine admired him immediately. "He just operates on a different level," she once told Victor. "He understands opportunity." Victor simply answered, "Maybe." What he didn't say was something he had learned in business long ago. People who constantly talk about opportunity are often looking for it inside other people's lives. Victor's birthday dinner that night was intentionally small. Just 4 guests. Good steak from a local butcher, a bottle of 18-year bourbon he had been saving, soft background music. Nothing extravagant, just an adult evening with people he believed were part of his real circle. Christian arrived late. Not excessively late, just late enough to be noticed. He brought an expensive bottle of scotch Victor immediately recognized as costing more than Christian's last venture had probably produced. Catherine greeted him at the door wearing a black dress Victor had bought her 6 months earlier. Victor noticed she had spent unusual effort on her appearance that evening. Her hair styled with more precision. Her makeup was more deliberate. At the time, he assumed she simply wanted to look good for his birthday. Later, he would understand she was preparing for a different audience. Dinner began normally. Stories, business discussions, real estate jokes, the comfortable background noise of people relaxing around good food and alcohol. Victor noticed Catherine laughing more than usual. Not just laughing. Leaning slightly toward Christian when she did. Maintaining eye contact slightly longer than normal. Small behavioral details most people would ignore. Victor noticed details. It was part of why his company worked. Still, he told himself he was imagining things. The moment everything changed happened without sound. No shouting, no obvious signal. Just one glance at the wrong moment. Victor reached for his glass and his eyes moved downward for less than 2 seconds. Long enough. Catherine's hand had disappeared beneath the tablecloth. At first, he assumed she was adjusting her chair. Then he saw where her hand actually rested. On Christian's leg. Her fingers weren't frozen there by accident. They were moving slowly, naturally, like a gesture that already had history behind it. Her wedding ring caught the light as her fingertips traced small movements against another man's thigh. Victor felt something inside his chest become very still. Not anger. Not yet. Recognition. What disturbed him more than the contact itself was what happened next. Catherine realized he had seen it, and instead of pulling her hand away, she left it there. She looked directly at him. There was no panic in her expression, no guilt, no attempt to hide anything, just something cold, evaluative, as if she was measuring his reaction. Victor understood something in that moment many people only understand much later. Disrespect rarely hides itself once it believes it is safe. He kept his voice completely even. Seems like everyone's enjoying the evening. Catherine took a slow sip of wine. If you're uncomfortable, Victor, you don't have to stay. We're just talking. Christian didn't look embarrassed. He didn't even pretend to. He leaned back slightly with relaxed confidence that suggested he believed he had already won something. People get too comfortable in routines, Christian said casually. Life is supposed to feel alive. Victor felt his jaw tighten slightly. You can't be serious, he said quietly. Silence spread quickly around the table. One guest suddenly became very focused on cutting steak. Another needed more water. Nobody wanted to become part of what was happening. Catherine gave a small shrug. We were just talking about how people settle, how they stop growing. Victor studied her face like he was looking at a stranger wearing someone else's features. In movies, this is where someone explodes. Voices rise, plates break, pride demands noise. Victor did something far more unsettling. He became calm, the kind of calm that comes when something irreversible becomes clear. He stood slowly, folded his napkin, placed it neatly beside his plate, picked up his jacket. Thank you, he said evenly. Now I understand. One of the guests tried to intervene. Victor, maybe we should just... He raised his hand gently. It's fine. His voice contained no anger. Please finish dinner. There's more bourbon in the kitchen. Then he walked out. No accusations, no confrontation, no performance, just departure. Sometimes walking away quietly is the loudest possible response a person can make. He drove for nearly 3 hours without direction. The city skyline disappeared behind him. His phone kept lighting up on the passenger seat. Where are you? You're overreacting. Come back so we can talk like adults. Then another message from a friend. Everyone left. Are you all right? Victor ignored every notification. A light rain began to fall as he parked outside a highway motel. He sat in the car watching drops form patterns across the windshield, while something inside him quietly reorganized itself. 16 years. Shared accounts. Shared routines. Shared assumptions. Victor had always believed he was the rational one, the stable one, the one who solved problems instead of reacting emotionally. Now one question repeated in his mind. What is the rational response when respect disappears? He checked into the motel under his middle name. The room smelled like cleaning chemicals and aging air conditioning. He lay fully dressed on the bed staring at faint water stains on the ceiling that looked like broken maps. By morning, his thoughts had stopped racing. They had narrowed. Daniel Mercer had once handled corporate security consulting for Victor's company before starting his own private security firm. They hadn't spoken often, but Daniel answered immediately. Victor, everything all right? No, Victor said, but I need help with something precise. 2 hours later, they sat in a diner 40 minutes from Victor's neighborhood. Victor explained everything without exaggeration. No emotional language, just facts. Daniel listened carefully. So you want to know exactly what happens in your house when you're not there? I want clarity, Victor corrected. Not assumptions. Daniel leaned back slightly. Once you see everything clearly, you don't get to go back. Victor nodded. I already crossed that line. 4 days later, while Catherine attended her regular afternoon Pilates session, Daniel installed 4 surveillance cameras inside the house. One in the living room concealed inside a smoke detector. One in the kitchen hidden inside a digital photo frame Victor had recently given her. One covering the backyard integrated into the outdoor audio system. And one inside the bedroom bookshelf. Placed carefully between decorative books Catherine hadn't opened in years. As Daniel finished, Victor stood quietly in the hallway, realizing something he had never fully understood before. Loyalty rarely disappears overnight. It erodes slowly. And sometimes the only way to see how far it has already eroded is to finally start paying attention. Victor didn't call Catherine after that night, not because he didn't have questions, because he already understood something more important. When someone shows you who they are without fear, asking questions rarely changes anything. He moved into a furnished apartment downtown overlooking the financial district. It wasn't home, it wasn't meant to be. It was quiet, clean, temporary. A place built for transition, not comfort. During the day, he focused on work, contracts, meetings, expansion plans. Numbers were easier to manage than emotions. At night, sometimes he opened the security app. Not obsessively, not constantly. Just enough. For 10 days, nothing happened. Catherine followed her usual routines. Pilates classes, coffee with friends, hours spent adjusting lighting and camera angles for social media posts inside the house Victor had paid for. She called him repeatedly during that time, sometimes angry, sometimes emotional, sometimes almost normal. Victor kept every conversation short and neutral. No, I won't be coming back tonight. Yes, I'm working. No, I don't think talking will change anything right now. He never argued. That unsettled her more than anger would have. On the 11th day, everything changed. Victor was reviewing a supplier agreement when his phone vibrated with a motion alert from the backyard camera. Tuesday, 2:14 p.m. Catherine was supposed to be at Pilates until after 3. Victor opened the live feed. Catherine and Christian Blake walked onto the patio together. She was relaxed, laughing, holding a drink. Christian's arm rested comfortably around her waist with a familiarity that doesn't develop quickly. Victor watched without reacting. To fresh starts, Christian said, raising his glass. Catherine gave a small, uncertain smile. Isn't this a little soon? She asked. He's only been gone a couple of weeks. Christian didn't hesitate. Men like Victor don't come back after something like that, he said. Their pride won't allow it. Catherine didn't disagree. That told Victor more than anything else. Christian pulled her closer and kissed her. It wasn't hesitant. It wasn't awkward. It looked practiced, like a continuation rather than a beginning. Victor closed the app after 30 seconds. Not because he couldn't watch, because he didn't need more confirmation. Over the next 3 weeks, Victor saw more than he ever wanted to know. Not because he spent hours watching, because patterns reveal themselves quickly when you stop lying to yourself. They met at the house when they believed he was working late. Sometimes they met at Christian's condo. Once they used Victor's own credit card for a weekend hotel reservation, either through carelessness or arrogance. Victor wasn't sure which possibility was worse. The most difficult recording came on what would have been their anniversary. Out of habit more than emotion, Victor had sent flowers earlier that day. A simple arrangement. No message beyond. Thinking of you today. That evening, Catherine brought Christian into the bedroom. Victor didn't watch long. He didn't need to. The flowers were visible on the nightstand. That was enough. For the first time since installing the cameras, Victor broke his own rule. He called her. Did the flowers arrive? He asked calmly. Yes, Catherine answered, sounding slightly surprised. They're beautiful, thank you. I'm glad you liked them, Victor said. A short pause followed. Victor, what is this about? I was just wondering if you noticed them while you had company. Silence. Not confused silence. Caught silence. What are you implying? She asked carefully. I'm not implying anything anymore, Victor said. I'm observing. Her tone changed immediately. You put cameras in the house? Now there was real anger. You're spying on me, that's illegal. Victor almost smiled at the shift. Is that really your concern right now? He asked quietly. Legal technicalities? She hung up. Victor expected anger, threats, demands. Instead, he got silence. 3 full days. Then a message appeared. We need to talk in person. They met at a neutral coffee shop downtown. Catherine looked different, less confident, less composed. The performance energy she normally carried seemed reduced. Victor didn't waste time. How long? She stared into her coffee. About 5 months. 5 months of conversations. 5 months of shared dinners. 5 months of sleeping beside someone who was already emotionally gone. He makes me feel different, she said finally, defensive. More alive. Victor studied her calmly. When was the last time you told me you needed something different? She didn't answer. What happens now? She eventually asked. Victor didn't hesitate. Now I protect myself. He had already archived every recording. Dates, times, backups, encrypted storage. Not because he needed proof legally. Their state didn't require it. He did it because he needed clarity. Engineers document failures. Builders document structural damage. This was no different. During this process, Victor discovered something else. Christian had convinced Catherine to co-sign several business loans tied to speculative development projects, high-risk structures, aggressive leverage, nearly $2 million of exposure. Victor recognized the numbers immediately. The projects were underfunded, dangerously so. Victor decided to meet Christian, not about Catherine, about money. He invited him for a drink under the pretense of clearing the air. Christian accepted quickly. Perhaps he expected weakness, maybe desperation. They met at a high-end bar where conversations stayed quiet and reputation stayed protected. Christian arrived late, exactly as Victor expected. Same confident walk, same controlled smile. "Victor," he said smoothly. "Good to see you. How are you holding up?" Victor didn't return the smile. "Let's skip the performance," he said calmly. "We're not friends." Christian shifted slightly. "I'm not here to talk about Catherine," Victor continued. That surprised him. "I'm here to talk about your financing." Now Christian was paying attention. "What about it?" Victor leaned slightly forward. "I'm curious how you convinced my wife to guarantee loans for a project that's underfunded by at least 30%. For the first time since they met, Christian Blake looked uncertain. "What exactly did you tell her to get her signature?" Victor continued quietly. Christian took a slow drink. "Buying time. I presented an opportunity. She made her own decision." Victor didn't react. "Did you explain personal liability exposure?" he asked. "Did you explain that if your project fails, she becomes personally responsible?" Christian's tone hardened slightly. "The project isn't going to fail." Victor leaned back. "I've seen dozens of projects like yours," he said. "Optimistic projections, thin safety margins, heavy leverage." Christian didn't respond. "They don't collapse immediately," Victor continued. "They erode." Silence. Victor watched him carefully. "I also heard there may be delays coming." That got his attention. "What delays?" Victor kept his voice neutral. "Environmental reviews, zoning complications, infrastructure approvals." He was bluffing, completely. But Christian didn't know that. And from the way his posture changed, Victor knew he had found pressure. "You really are trying to interfere because of Catherine," Christian said quietly. Victor shook his head. "I'm doing what any responsible investor does. Asking questions." Christian leaned forward. "Stay out of my business." There it was, not confidence. Fear disguised as aggression. "You already lost Catherine," Christian added. "Don't make this worse for yourself." Victor allowed himself a small smile. That sounded very close to a threat. Christian recalculated immediately. "Just advice." Victor stood calmly and placed cash on the table. "You should probably start looking for additional investors," Victor said. "Projects like yours rarely survive unexpected delays." As he walked away, Victor noticed something he hadn't seen before: uncertainty. And for the first time since that dinner, he felt something close to balance returning. Not revenge, not satisfaction, control. And that was when Victor understood something else. This wasn't just betrayal anymore. This was becoming a reckoning. Christian Blake recovered his confidence quickly after their meeting, at least on the surface. The smile returned, the posture returned, the relaxed tone returned. But Victor noticed something important. It wasn't quite the same smile, it was tighter, controlled. The kind of expression people use when they realize a conversation didn't go the way they expected. "Catherine believes in the project," Christian had said. "She sees potential where other people see risk." Victor had let a few seconds pass before answering. "Catherine doesn't understand commercial development structures," he said calmly. "What she understands is people she trusts." Christian's jaw tightened slightly. "What exactly are you suggesting?" Victor didn't raise his voice. "What exactly did you explain before asking for her signature?" Christian took a slow drink. Buying time again. "I showed her an opportunity." Victor held his gaze. "Did you explain personal liability exposure?" Silence. "Did you explain that if your financing collapses, she becomes personally responsible for millions in debt?" Christian's tone became defensive. "The project isn't collapsing." Victor didn't argue. "I've reviewed dozens of developments like yours," he said calmly. "They don't fail all at once. They weaken." Christian didn't answer. Victor continued quietly. "Capital pressure, Permit delays, cost overruns, liquidity gaps. They don't explode. They suffocate. That was the moment Christian understood something uncomfortable. Victor wasn't reacting emotionally. He was analyzing, and that was far more dangerous. Christian leaned forward. You really are trying to interfere because of Catherine? Victor shook his head slightly. No. I'm asking the same questions any lender eventually will. Christian's voice hardened. Stay out of my business. Victor noticed something behind the words, not confidence, fear. You already lost Catherine, Christian added. Don't lose your dignity too. Victor allowed a slight smile. That sounded almost like a warning. Christian corrected quickly. Advice. Victor stood calmly. You should start looking for backup financing, he said. Projects like yours rarely survive unexpected pressure. As Victor left, he noticed something new. Christian didn't look victorious anymore. He looked concerned. That was enough. Victor didn't confront Catherine about the loans immediately. He didn't argue. He didn't accuse. He did something far more effective. He gathered information. Every document, every signature, every transfer, every timeline. Because Victor understood something emotional people often don't. Information is leverage, and leverage changes power. 2 days later, Victor contacted someone from his past. Rachel Bennett had worked with him nearly 15 years earlier when his company was still small. Since then, she had become a highly respected attorney specializing in financial litigation and complex divorces. More importantly, she had no loyalty to Catherine. They met at a quiet restaurant downtown. Rachel studied him carefully. You look like someone who's been hit by a truck. Victor gave a tired half smile. That sounds accurate. He gave her the condensed version. Marriage collapse, affair, financial exposure, asset protection. Rachel listened without interrupting, then asked one question. Does Catherine know how much you know? No. Do you want reconciliation? Victor didn't answer immediately. Outside the window, people walked past with normal problems, normal lives, normal assumptions. No, he said finally. I want to survive this. Rachel nodded once. Then we prepare. Her voice shifted into pure professional mode. I'll need everything. Prenup, corporate structures, property titles, loan exposure, account history. Victor nodded. This is going to get ugly, she added. Victor didn't hesitate. It already is. What Victor didn't say was something else had already changed inside him. He wasn't reacting anymore. He was positioning. His first move was almost invisible. 2 weeks later, Victor posted a single photo online. Nothing dramatic, just dinner at an upscale restaurant. Rachel sitting across from him, both professionally dressed, wine glasses raised. The caption read, "Sometimes change isn't loss. Sometimes it's freedom." Within minutes, his phone filled with reactions. Support, curiosity, concern. Then Catherine started calling. 16 calls in less than an hour. Victor didn't answer. The messages started instead. Who is she? Are you trying to make me jealous? Is this what you're doing now? Victor said nothing. The next morning, he updated his relationship status. Separated. Another quiet move. Catherine appeared at his office that afternoon without warning. She walked past reception before anyone could stop her. What are you doing? She demanded. Victor didn't raise his voice. Working. You know what I mean? Victor leaned back calmly. I posted a photo. You're trying to humiliate me. Victor studied her expression. I had dinner, he said. It's interesting how that became about you. Her voice tightened. Is she just a friend? Victor held her gaze. You're very interested in definitions now. She flinched slightly. That's not fair. Victor let out a quiet breath. Fair? For the first time, irritation showed. A mistake is forgetting a payment. A mistake is burning dinner. What you did required planning, repetition, secrecy. Her confidence began to fracture. What do you want from me? Victor answered immediately. Nothing. That answer landed harder than anger. Her next question came quietly. Is she your lawyer? Victor didn't answer, which answered everything. After 16 years, this is how it ends? Victor allowed some truth into his voice. It didn't end with a photo. It ended the night you decided I wasn't in the room anymore." Silence filled the office. Then Victor began implementing the legal strategy Rachel prepared. Joint credit exposure was limited, new financial accounts established, corporate protections activated, and most importantly, a clause in their prenuptial agreement Catherine had barely paid attention to years earlier was activated. The morality clause. Infidelity had financial consequences. A week later, Catherine discovered she no longer had unrestricted access to joint accounts. The same week, Christian's development proposal lost a major investor after additional due diligence concerns appeared. 3 days later, Catherine received a call from a bank compliance officer regarding irregularities in the loan guarantees she had signed. That was the beginning of the collapse. And for the first time, Catherine began realizing something she hadn't considered. Christian Blake might not be the future she thought he was. The first real fractures didn't happen all at once. Collapse rarely does. It begins quietly. Pressure appearing in places people once believed were stable. Catherine began understanding the financial reality before she fully understood the emotional one. The call from the bank came on a Thursday morning. At first, the conversation sounded routine. Compliance review, document verification, standard questions. Then the questions became more precise. "Mrs. Lang, can you confirm whether you received independent financial advice before signing as guarantor?" Catherine hesitated. "It wasn't that formal," she said carefully. Christian explained the opportunity. A short pause followed. "And you understood that personal guarantees mean you assume full liability if the project defaults?" Silence. That silence answered more than words could. Meanwhile, Victor's life continued moving forward in ways Catherine had not expected. He wasn't falling apart. He wasn't drinking. He wasn't trying to repair anything. He was improving. He joined an early morning rowing club. He started training again. He lost weight, changed his haircut, updated his wardrobe. Not out of revenge, out of separation. The more stable Victor became, the more unstable Catherine began to feel. The social consequences arrived next. Not because Victor tried to expose her. He didn't post recordings. He didn't gossip. He didn't attack her publicly. He simply allowed a very small circle of people to understand the truth. Close friends, her brother, 2 couples who had been at the dinner. Not the intimate details, just enough facts to remove uncertainty. And something predictable happened. People didn't choose Victor. They stepped away from Catherine. Her closest friend stopped calling. Another friend quietly canceled a planned trip. Invitations stopped coming. Messages became shorter, less warm. Truth has gravity, and people instinctively move away from where it lands. At the same time, Christian's world was tightening. Investors began asking harder questions. One partner delayed funding. Another requested revised financial projections. A routine tax review expanded into something deeper. Victor didn't interfere. He simply observed. Because consequences rarely need help once they begin moving. 4 months after the birthday dinner, Victor formally filed for divorce. Catherine received the documents at the house, the same house she had once assumed she would keep. Rachel Bennett handled everything with surgical precision. Every filing referenced the prenuptial agreement, every financial exposure documented, every clause activated. Catherine's attorney contacted Victor directly. "Mr. Lang, my client is open to discussing a more cooperative settlement." Victor's response was simple. "All communication goes through my attorney." This approach seems unnecessarily aggressive. Victor paused before answering. Consequences often feel aggressive to people who expected forgiveness. 2 weeks later, they met in family court for the first hearing. Catherine looked different, carefully composed, conservatively dressed, styled to appear professional and sympathetic. She didn't look at Victor. Christian wasn't present. That absence spoke clearly. The judge reviewed the filings before addressing Catherine's attorney. "Your motion to invalidate the prenuptial agreement appears weak." Her attorney attempted to argue Catherine hadn't fully understood the morality clause. Rachel responded calmly. "Mrs. Lang had independent counsel. She holds a business degree. She participated in financial decisions for years. Suggesting she didn't understand the agreement contradicts her own background." Victor almost smiled. Rachel wasn't attacking Catherine. She was using Catherine's competence against her. The judge nodded. Was she represented by independent counsel? Yes. Did she object to the clause? No. Then the agreement stands. That was the first real fracture. Then came the discussion of evidence. Catherine's attorney argued the surveillance violated privacy. Rachel remained calm. The property belongs solely to Mr. Lang. Cameras were placed in common areas for security purposes. Independent financial and communications evidence confirms the relationship regardless. The arguments continued nearly 2 hours. Catherine's confidence declined visibly. At one point, her attorney attempted another strategy, painting Victor as controlling. He monitored spending, questioned her whereabouts, created emotional pressure. Catherine supported the narrative quietly. He always needed to know where I was. Victor listened without reaction. When it was his turn, he spoke simply. I trusted my wife. I funded her business. I supported her decisions. I installed security after witnessing inappropriate behavior in my own home. No anger, no theatrics, just facts. Rachel then introduced financial records, monthly discretionary transfers Victor provided, equipment purchases, marketing expenses, messages encouraging Catherine's projects. Then she introduced testimony from Catherine's own friend. Reluctant, uncomfortable, honest. Was Catherine afraid of Victor? Rachel asked. No. Was she isolated? No. Did Victor control her? No. If anything, he gave her more freedom than most husbands. That was the second fracture. The third happened outside the courtroom. Christian began answering Catherine's calls less frequently. At first, he blamed stress, meetings, investors, delays. Then responses became shorter, then delayed, then absent. Stress reveals priorities. And Catherine was no longer his. Victor didn't celebrate. He didn't enjoy it. He simply observed something he now fully understood. Some people appear confident while everything is easy. Remove stability, and their real character appears. The emotional shift happened one evening after a hearing. Catherine approached Victor carefully. Do you hate me? Victor looked at her for a long moment. No, he said. That answer unsettled her more than anger would have. I just don't recognize you anymore. For the first time, Catherine looked genuinely afraid. Not of Victor, of reality. Because she was beginning to understand something Christian had never explained. When chaos begins, some people step forward, and some disappear. Victor had already stepped outside the chaos, emotionally, psychologically, completely. That was the moment Catherine realized something she hadn't prepared for. Victor wasn't trying to win her back. He wasn't trying to punish her. He wasn't trying to prove anything. He was simply done. And there is nothing more psychologically unreachable than someone who no longer needs anything from you. By the time the second hearing began, the direction of the outcome was already clear. Christian Blake didn't attend. That absence spoke louder than any testimony could have. Catherine arrived alone with her attorney, looking composed but visibly worn down. The confidence she once carried so naturally had been replaced by something more fragile. Not regret yet, just the realization that control had quietly slipped out of her hands. Her attorney made one final attempt to shift momentum. Expert witnesses, psychological interpretations, financial projections, anything that might introduce doubt. Rachel dismantled each argument with calm precision. Victor's business records showed Catherine had no operational role in the company's growth. Financial statements demonstrated years of support rather than restriction. Witness testimony contradicted the narrative of control. Facts have a way of removing performance. By the end of the hearing, the judge's patience was visibly thinning. This court is interested in evidence, not speculation, she said firmly after another attempt to introduce theoretical expert testimony. Unless your next witness has direct knowledge of the facts, we are finished with hypotheticals. That was the moment Catherine understood she was losing. Not emotionally, legally. The ruling came 3 weeks later. The prenuptial agreement remained fully enforceable. The morality clause was activated. Catherine would receive exactly what the contract specified: 20% of shared assets. No claim to Victor's company. No long-term support. The house would be sold and divided according to the same ratio: 80-20. Simple arithmetic. Catherine sat completely still while the decision was read. Victor felt nothing. No victory. No anger. Just finality. Outside the courtroom, Catherine approached him without an audience for the first time. You're destroying everything, she said quietly. Victor looked at her steadily. No, he said. You did that yourself. Her voice sharpened slightly. You think you've won? Victor almost smiled. This was never about winning. Rachel stepped forward smoothly. Any further communication should go through counsel. But Catherine wasn't finished. One day you're going to regret this, she said. When you're alone. Victor considered that for a moment. I was alone long before I left, he answered. That ended the conversation. The financial consequences accelerated faster than Catherine expected. Christian's project collapsed after 2 primary investors withdrew funding, following deeper financial review. Banks initiated recovery procedures. Catherine's personal guarantees became very real obligations. Christian stopped answering her calls. When he finally responded, it wasn't to comfort her, it was to protect himself. In statements to financial investigators, he positioned Catherine as a fully informed participant. Not misled, not naive, responsible. The same man who once spoke about their future now spoke about liability exposure. Catherine called Victor late one night. Her voice sounded stripped of confidence. Did you know he would do this? I didn't know, Victor answered honestly. But I'm not surprised. They're saying I knew everything. They're talking about legal exposure. Months earlier, Victor would have stepped in, protected her, tried to help. That version of him no longer existed. You should find a good attorney, he said quietly. How can you be this cold? She asked. Victor answered without hesitation. I learned from experience. Through everything, Victor never raised his voice publicly, never attacked Catherine socially, never tried to humiliate her. He simply stepped aside and allowed consequences to unfold naturally. 6 months after the birthday dinner, Victor relocated to expand his company into a new regional market. New office, new routines, new environment. One afternoon, he received a short message from Catherine's brother. She's teaching again. Small apartment. Starting over. Victor read the message and set the phone down. He didn't feel satisfaction. Only distance. He replied hours later. I hope she finds stability. And he meant it. Christian Blake disappeared from Victor's life completely. His reputation suffered damage but not destruction. Men like Christian rarely collapse completely. They relocate. They reset. They find environments where their past is unknown. Victor understood something important about that. Some people learn. Some people simply move. About a year after that dinner, Victor found himself sitting on a small charter flight over the African savanna during a business expansion trip. Below him, elephants moved slowly across golden plains like something permanent and ancient. No phone signal, no notifications, no noise, just distance. That night at a remote lodge under a sky filled with more stars than he had ever seen, someone asked him a simple question over dinner. What brought you here? Victor thought about it carefully. I had to lose something important, he said, to understand what actually mattered. The person nodded. That's usually how it happens. Later, Victor sat by a fire with a glass of whiskey, realizing something he hadn't fully understood before. They thought they had taken everything from him that night. His marriage, his stability, his certainty. What they actually took was his fear of starting over. And that turned out to be the one thing he never needed again. Some people mistake silence for weakness. Some mistake patience for ignorance. And some only realize too late that the person they thought they were breaking was simply deciding who they would become next. If this story made you feel something, hit that like button. Drop a comment telling us what you would have done in the main character's place, and subscribe to Sinner Stories so you never miss a new video.